Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books that I've never mentioned on my channel before. I believe all of these I read last year. Last year was definitely my best reading year, not only in terms of the quantity of books that I read about like 150, which is the most I've ever read in a year, but also in terms of quality. I read so many books that ended up being my all-time favorites. A lot of them really got lost in the shuffle and I never really mentioned them because I didn't end up ever doing a end of the year favorites video. I don't know. I always planned on doing it and then it just never happened. So technically this could be like my favorite books of 2018, but I feel like these are actually my all-time favorite books, aside from the obvious ones that I mention all the time. Let's just get into them. There's really no order to these, so we're just gonna start with what's at the top of my pile, which is the Veronica Speedwell series by Diana Rayburn. I only own books 1 and 2, but I have read all 4 books in the series that are out so far. I love this series so much. I discovered it last year and I binge read the first 3 books and then I had to wait an entire year for the 4th book to come out, which let me just tell you, the wait was worth it. This is a mystery series that takes place in the 1800s in London and it follows Veronica Speedwell, and she is I can never remember what the term for it is, but she's a scientist who studies butterflies. So she has been traveling the world hunting down rare butterfly species and documenting them. At the start of the series, a very good friend of hers is murdered. So she teams up with this very grumpy natural historian. He is also a friend of the person who died. And so they team up together to solve the mystery, figure out who killed their friend. And so the whole series is both of them solving mysteries together. But what I love about the series so much is the incredibly slow burn romance between Veronica and Stoker. If you like extremely slow burn, torturous romances, you're definitely gonna like this series. I literally died reading book 4. That's all I'm gonna say. But I have not shipped 2 characters as much as I ship these 2 in a long time. They are just so perfect together. Also, the mysteries are really good. I would definitely say that if you like the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, you definitely are gonna wanna pick these up because they're very similar. Love this series. Following along a similar theme, this is also a historical murdery book. This is Jane Steele by Lindsay. This is a Jane Eyre retelling where Jane is a serial killer. She murders bad men. So men who commit rape, men who are abusive, she kills them. I really love this. I was hooked from the first page. It opens with, "Reader, I murdered him." And we're following Jane throughout her whole life up until she's in her late 20s. So it starts when she's a kid, and throughout her life, she has encountered several men who are just horrible people, and she enacts revenge against them. I just became obsessed with this. I became obsessed with Jane Steele as a character. I'm genuinely so sad that this is a standalone because I want to follow Jane for the rest of her life. In the world of Jane Steele, the book Jane Eyre exists, and it's Jane Steele's favorite book, and throughout it she kind of contemplates how her and Jane Eyre's lives are very similar. So yeah, I definitely recommend this if you're looking for a historical fiction with a lot of murder, a lot of feminism, a very kick-ass character who does not give 2 fucks. Okay, this book, I don't think I've ever talked about this on my channel, and I don't know how. I don't know how. This is Jade City by Fonda. It is very rare that I read books that are this chunky. This is a fantasy book that the way that this world is set up, there is something called Jade. Jade is something that you can possess. You can wear it on your body. You can wear it as jewelry. Some people have it embedded into their skin, like as earrings. It's something that you can wear and it gives you superhuman abilities. Basically, it kind of like makes you an ultimate super kung fu fighter, strength and speed and agility, and you can like see people's movements before they happen. And this follows the Call family, who are the family that are in charge of this city, and we're following the point of views of the 4 siblings in this family. There is a war going on, a power struggle. There is so much action. I think that this book had some of my all-time favorite action scenes, and I loved this family so much. I loved the characters. I grew so attached to them. Okay, the next one I know I've talked about before, but I definitely don't think I've talked about it enough for how much I loved it, and that is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, which is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. This is a horror book that follows a documentary crew who are going on an expedition to the Mariana Trench because 7 years prior, an expedition went out to film a mockumentary. It was people who film like fake documentaries for Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, and they went to the Mariana Trench to film about these mermaids. But it turned out that the mermaids were real and they were killer mermaids, and everyone on the ship died. So now, 7 years later, this new expedition full of scientists are going out to find out what happened, and this book follows that crew. It is definitely very scary at parts. If you have any type of like claustrophobia or fear of the dark or wide open spaces, like I do, those are my 3 top fears. It's very scary. There was also so much diversity. There is a female-female relationship that I adored so much. There is a deaf character and who speaks sign language in the book. I know that there was a lot more diversity that I can't think of. There's a lot of racial diversity. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been over a year since I read it, but I just loved this so much. It's definitely my favorite horror book that I've ever read. The next one, The Book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Ellison. This is a post-apocalyptic book where Earth's population has dramatically decreased. There was a disease that went around that killed a lot of people, but mostly women and children. It also made childbirth near impossible. The main character of this book is a woman who was a midwife, and she basically is traveling around the country giving birth control shots to the remaining women that she finds, because this world has now become incredibly dangerous for women since they are so rare. A lot of them are being abducted and forced to be slaves and sex slaves. A lot of them are being raped and killed. This is a very dark book, and it was hard to read at times, but it is also just so impactful. The next book is, I hesitate to say it's my favorite book of last year, but I think it is Strange Grace by Tessa Groton. This is a young adult horror book. It follows this town where long ago a witch and the devil fell in love, and they made a pact for when the slaughter moon rises, this town will sacrifice their best boy to the devil's forest, and their town will be given prosperity for the next 7 years. Nothing bad will happen, nobody will get sick, nobody will die, everything will be great as long as every 7 years they sacrifice their best boy. This book follows 3 characters. One of them is the daughter of the current Grace Witch in the village. The other one is the current best boy in the village, so he is the one who is kind of like being raised for the slaughter. And then the third one, he is someone that when he was younger, his mother dressed him up as a girl and passed him off as a girl so that no one would know he was a boy, so there was no chance that he could ever be the best boy. And the 3 of them are very connected, very intertwined. They have a polyamorous relationship with each other. It is honestly one of my favorite romantic relationships in young adult. They are just so connected with each other, and you really can't have one without the other 2, and I just loved that so much. But more than the characters, I loved the setting of this book. This town, as well as the Devil's Forest, was just so atmospheric and creepy. The horror elements in this are really great as well. I don't know, I loved this book a lot. So kind of sticking with the Tessa Groton train, because she has become one of my all-time favorite authors. I have read 2 books by her, and they're both like my favorite books ever. So the other one that I read by her last year was The Queens of Fennerslear. This is an adult fantasy. It is a retelling of Shakespeare's King Lear. It follows three sisters who are all in a power struggle for the crown. I know that this is a book that a lot of people probably aren't gonna like. Just looking on Goodreads, a lot of people DNF'd this, and I understand why. It's not a very action-packed book or plot-based book. It's really character-driven, which is the type of books that I love. I feel like most of the books that I've mentioned so far are more character-driven books than plot-driven, and this one more so than any of the others. It's a long book, and really not that much happens plot-wise, but character development-wise, so much happens, and the characters are so incredible. You follow the point of view of the three sisters as well as some other side characters, and I could never figure out which characters were my favorite. All three sisters are kind of on opposite sides, so depending on whose chapter I was reading, I was on a different side of this war. The magic was so interesting and cool. This definitely is a very politic-heavy book. I also really liked how there is a religion that is very heavily driven by the stars and how your birth stars prophesize your life. I really love this book. I think if you enjoy character-driven books and you're willing to put in the time and the effort to read this. The next book is The Sisters of the Winterwood by Rena Rossner. This is a retelling of The Goblin Market, and it follows two sisters who discover that one of them can turn into a bear and the other one can turn into a swan. And this group of mysterious boys come into town, and one of these sisters falls under their spell. There are romantic relationships in this book, but the book really heavily is about the relationship between these sisters. It's also heavily about Jewish culture. The family in this are Jewish, and in this village, they are really ostracized and looked down upon because of that. But there is a very tight, close-knit Jewish community of people who are there for each other. Writing in this was really beautiful. One of the sisters' points of view is told in verse. At first, it was a little tough to get used to, but once I did, it was just so beautiful. I definitely would say if you liked Blanca y Roja by Anne-Marie McLemore, both of those books deal with very similar themes. The next book is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. At one time, this was my favorite book of last year. This is a fantasy standalone book that follows three women who are all dealing with abusive men in their life and fighting back against them. One of them, Miriam, is the daughter of a moneylender, and she discovers that she has the ability to turn silver into gold, and that catches the eye of the Stark King. The Stark in this world, they're basically like ice fae. So the Stark King kidnaps her and makes her live in his ice palace and turn all of his silver into gold. The second girl is Wanda, who is a maid in Miriam's home, and she has an abusive father and a little brother that she is taking care of. And then the third woman is the daughter of a lord who is being wed off to the Tsar, and the Tsar is not what he seems. There is a darkness to him. This book is an incredible example at taking three different storylines and slowly and methodically interweaving them. Aside from these three women fighting off oppression and abusive men in their lives, there is also an undercurrent of this war brewing between the Stark King and a fire demon, and these three women all kind of get into the crosshairs of that war. There is a little bit of romance in here that I definitely was here for. I'm also now realizing that most of these books don't have romance, or the romance is like a very minor subplot. That's very interesting, especially considering romance is my favorite genre. So those are all of my favorite books that I haven't talked about on my channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!